Cedar Swamp Disc Golf Course lies nestled in a small neighborhood of Old Saybrook, Connecticut. The course, established in 2023, features two layouts of varying difficulties, one designed for intermediate players and one designed for advanced. I can personally attest to the quality of this course, and on many occasions, I have claimed that this course alone is the reason I still play disc golf. Along with being an excellent course, I have a personal relationship with its inception. The course was co-designed by Rob Lemire and Matthew Mesite, the former being a regionally well-known course designer, and the latter being my 7th grade math teacher and founder of the Connecticut Shore Disc Golf Club. After learning of my personal connection to this course, I reached out to Mr. Mesite in hopes that we would be able to play around together. Thankfully, he said yes and agreed to record it.
Well, I'm Matt Mesite.
Matt,
Your
that's
old
true.
math teacher.
I probably forgot an introduction, didn't
Well, you asked me to introduce myself, so
Yeah.
I'm Matt. What prompted my disc golf journey? I grew up playing ball golf, as we call it. Played for Valley Regional, in fact, captain for 2 years.
Really?
And I don't know, after college, I was playing golf with my cousin, and I was never that good. And I was like, this game might be more fun if I could throw the ball.
Oh, that's money. Alright. Nice little backstop, too.
So I just like that it was a little bit more of a casual version of a game that I really enjoy.
Gotcha.
And I got into the different discs and the different shot shapes and the different things you can do.
While we are, on the topic of discs, we have our bags, right next to us, just kind of on display. I'm sure someone who's new to the game is wondering, why do we have so many? Obviously, you have significantly fewer than I do, and I could probably, chop down on my supply a little bit, but what's the point?
So the point is I always say that most disc golfers are one disc away from the perfect bag, and once they find that one more disc, they'll stop buying them, but it never happens. You can play the game with as few discs as you'd like, but if you would like to take it seriously, there are a number of different shots, a number of different speeds. So discs that are like this, that look a little bit more like a traditional frisbee, are putters. These don't go as far. They're a little bit more accurate. You can throw them a little bit more with your wrist and your arm versus your lower body. They glide, but they don't really go as far versus something like this, which is a distance driver. Looks more like a discus you might see with track and field. Mm-hmm. These go extremely far, but they require a lot of power. You need to use your full body to throw them. They're not quite as accurate. And then you have everything in between. You have mid-ranges that are sometimes a little bit wider in shape. Some discs hook really hard in one direction, some discs hook really hard in the opposite direction. After they hit trees, they fly differently. So, you need to be able to cover a bunch of different shot shapes, distances, directions, and arguably around 20 discs is often enough to get you there.
So we talked, obviously, about your kind of introduction into the game. Did you ever imagine that you would go from, player, occasional competitor to a tournament director, course designer, someone who's more on the, I guess for lack of a better term, the back end of the sport rather than the front end, just casual player?
I think the course design stuff is less surprising.
Yeah.
My brother and I actually, when we first, this is pre-2010, we went to a couple Essex Park and Rec meetings to try to get a course at Vinybrook Park, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of persistent commitment and going to a lot of meetings and things moving very slowly, which we didn't have the patience back then. But we were always interested in growing the game, getting more courses, partially selfishly because we didn't like driving an hour to have to play to the couple courses that there were, but also because it's part of the appeal is how different all the holes are. I think that's something disc golf has over traditional golf. I think there's a lot more variety in holes. You can have wide open, you could have wooded, you could have everything in between. And just the idea of designing holes was always fun to us.
Next hole is a shorty, but it proves kind of tough just how tight it is. As the crow flies, do you go up the middle or around the outside?
There's a little cheater gap that I made for myself.
Really?
In the tournament director stuff, I don't know where that came from. I think that's like the teacher organizer in me, that my objective has always just been to run things that I'd want to play in. And for a while, there was not as many tournaments being run, and it was the same couple people who were doing a great job and were the foundation for everything. But I could see that there was a need there. So, and it was always about this place. Like, I've run tournaments at a bunch of different courses, but I always kind of joke with my friend Rob, who's built a couple courses, that like the courses he built, the tournaments I ran before Cedar Swamp were all practice for Cedar Swamp. We wanted to get good by the time that we were ready to make things happen here, so that it would be the best it can be. And we're pretty pleased with how it came out.
How does a project like this start? Because like, I can imagine, I had never been here prior to the course, but that was just woods before, right? Some hiking trails maybe. But how do you go from just dense woods to, you know, especially with this course, you have some wider fairways. Like, I remember in a video, someone likened it to W.R. Jackson in the way that you have very wide open lines while still being in the woods. How do you go from straight up woods to a whole 18-hole disc golf course?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I'll do my best to keep it brief. The least exciting part, but the part that requires the most work, is actually before you are in the woods, which is going through the town, getting approvals, getting permission, convincing people it is worthwhile to invest space, time, money, energy into. So that's a lot of work. The actual designing of the holes is the fun part. In terms of that, walk out here a lot. Luckily, Rob and I both live in town, so I'm able to pop out on a lunch break here and there. We'll come out during the weekends. He's also in a situation where he's able to come out here during his workday, and it's just walking in one direction, walking in the opposite direction, finding really cool topography and memorable stuff in the woods, and figuring out how you can just make one hole in that spot, rather than, I think a lot of people think it's like, okay, you make hole one, then you go and make hole two. You have to find the really cool spots. You have to hone those holes. You have to figure out what they are. And then you have to figure out, okay, what do we have? What do we not have? And how do we get to this hole, to the next hole, and everything in between? So it's a little bit of a puzzle, kind of turning it into exactly 18 that flows, that doesn't have a lot of long walks. And it's just time, creativity, walking out here in different seasons, like looks a whole lot different in the winter than it does in the spring and the summer. So thinking about how it's going to look with the leaves on the trees, leaves off the trees. And then it's just starting to like trim the fairways a little bit, see if they look the way you're expecting. A lot of the holes we thought were going to be super long are actually not that long par threes. It's funny how things change when you just like cut out some underbrush. But yeah, just trying to work off of the strengths and then building the rest out from there. I've pretty steadfastly said that hole 16 is my favorite, particularly the blue. That wasn't it, but it'll be fine.
Should play.
I'm just so not used to throwing a wide rim disc right now.
That probably felt pretty weird, didn't it?
Coming out of my hand, yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, give it the height line.
Get up. Fun footing.
That would have been good.
I really like the shape of the tee shot. The green is probably my favorite green in the state, just from an aesthetic standpoint, with the water almost panoramic behind the basket, elevated basket with the little shims on the bottom that kind of matches the motif of the course. So favorite is pretty easy for me. It is 16. There's others that I like a whole lot, but that to me is number one. Least favorite, like I was saying, you kind of build the holes you want and then you fill in the gaps. There's a few holes out here that are what we would call fillers, that we tried to make the best hole we could, but we had to use a spot.
Yeah.
You can probably guess some of those, but I'll spoil two of them. I think they turned out all right, but the two that I said got done last, hole 8 and hole 14. Get lucky. Okay. We had a couple spaces we could add holes, and those are the spots that we picked. And if you're not looking for it, I don't think you can tell. But if you think about it in the flow of the round, you could probably figure out, like, oh, they just needed to get from 7 to 9 or 13 to 15.
So now that you're done with the whole project, you've seen how people have received it. How does it feel to like have something that you've put so much time and effort into come out, as good as you could have hoped?
It's incredible. I mean, like I was thinking about that on the drive over, thinking about sorts of things you might ask me, and like it doesn't feel that long ago that I was like prematurely putting the course on UDisc and like setting up the holes and me coming out here and just throwing in the woods as though it was a real course, and how even at that point it didn't feel real to now like having it be a really well liked course in the state. It's amazing. I think I knew that I loved it by the time it was finished, so I was content with any response whatsoever. If people hated it, if they loved it, anything in between, I would have been content just knowing that like I'm going to play this course a lot. I really enjoy these holes, and I think it brings a different style of disc golf to the area because I can't think of another course within an hour that plays like this one. And that's what we set out to do, is make a course that we wanted to play and that we felt brought something new. Like we've heard from top pros in the area to people that travel in to brand new players, and everybody seems to just like find something to love about this place. But yeah, talking to people in person, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And even like questions or like little nuanced things people want to talk about, like I love to talk about that stuff. So if there's little things like, why did you do this and not that, like those are conversations I'll have all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's incredible, and it's very rewarding given the hundreds of hours I've spent out here. Granted, I did not do any of the building, that was all Rob, but I do think it's important for people to understand that like it takes hundreds of hours just to design, let alone build a course, if you want it to come out well and you want it to be well received. It's not just a couple hikes through the woods, throw some flags down, and then have somebody else go in and cut it. It'll be a disc golf course, but it might not be a fun one or one that people want to play. So
Now, for those unaware, that is the tee pad of hole 18 right there. It is a 150-foot water carry that if you don't clear it, you lose your disc. If you don't make it on a little island, you have to take a stroke and play from a drop zone. Do you ever feel guilty as a course designer when you design a hole that is like, not necessarily the intention behind it, but there is a very high risk of losing a disc?
I have. More so on 17 than 18.
Yeah.
To me on 18,
18's rather
kinda on
chill,
you.
yeah.
17 the long is tough, and you can throw what seems like a good shot and an errant branch could reach out and drop it in the water. So a couple times I've been out with friends and they've thrown a disc they really like and they lose it, and that's kind of a bummer. So there's some
Yeah.
guilt there, but it's nice to have action sports right down the road, so you
That's
can
true,
you
no,
can
but-
replace that disc and support local and support a business that supports the course because they manage our lost and found. So yeah, when I first started playing, I was very intimidated by water holes. So the fact that we have 2 water holes to finish this course is kind of ironic in that way. But we really did try to keep them fair for the ability level of the course. Like we were never going to put a hole like 17 blue on the white layout. I think 18 white is almost too short for a lot of players. Like I kind of hate playing that hole
I go OB
because
long
it's
most
just so
of the
hard to
time,
throw a
yeah.
chip like that, and you can't hyzer in. But that hole isn't really for me. That is for players like throwing over water for the very first time, and that's such a cool achievement. And as much as it does stink to throw a disc, like a young kid who's playing here and eventually gets old enough to want to try to throw over the water that first time they clear it is going to be really a moment for them. So that's really cool. So yeah, it's a risk-reward situation, but we thought we did it tastefully and fairly. So, but yeah, this thing has eaten up a couple discs in its day already.
So you've talked about, being a veteran in the sport, at least relatively speaking. How have you seen the sport change in recent years?
Well, we've grown a ton since the pandemic. I think it was like one of the activities that people realized they could do safely and healthy and be outside with trusted friends and family. So there's been a huge boom. There's so many more players. But as far as the game itself, beyond just like the culture and the player population, I think the biggest change that I have noticed in the last 5 years or so is how much easier of an entry point there has become. Like the education online, like with YouTube and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And more pros with content and YouTube channels. It's easy to get good so much faster, and I'm so jealous that I wish that when I was in my early mid-20s I had some of these resources, because I'm still decades later trying to break some bad habits that I've had just from picking up the Frisbee and doing what I could with it. So it definitely seems like there's so many players that will start and within a year they're throwing 325 feet, and like I couldn't do that until over a decade into playing. I think the education and resources has brought the game to a level more like a real professional sport.
So we've looked into the past, let's look into the future. What's next for, not necessarily disc golf as a whole, because you can't predict an entire population here. What's next for specifically Cedar Swamp? What's next for you, you know?
I would love to have a red layout out here, knowing that the white layout, which is the easier layout compared to the blue layout, gets almost twice as much play than the blue, shows that like this population is looking for shorter, more achievable, more scoreable holes. And sometimes I am too. I wanted to be able to throw a lot of drivers and mid-ranges on this course, but I miss throwing putter. So I'd love to have some holes that I could throw putter onto. So it wouldn't just be a beginner's junior layout, it would just be a shorter layout. We do have this space that we were able to use for the course that we opted not to, that we really like the idea of actually making a true youth layout on. So very short, very fun oriented. So maybe some like goofy basket placements, maybe some like, I don't know if there's characters or monuments built out there. So yeah, some shorter holes is definitely on the docket. But then there's also some areas in which we want to put some sleeves in the ground for some alternate long holes. Like hole 18 here is not one of the longest holes in the course, but for some of our bigger tournaments, there's definitely some longer water carries we could create. So creating some alternate tournament-only holes for a higher level of competition is something we've talked about since even before the course opened. Even like looking at this hole right here, there's a spot over here where we could easily put a T-pad to make an alternate longer blue carry. So we're always talking about things that could be different or changed or better added.
What's next for you personally? Do you have another tournament coming down the line, another course, anything big like that, or just?
We'll definitely have the third installment of Swamp Fest, same weekend next year, daylight savings.
November 1st and 2nd?
November 1st and 2nd. It's been creeping up as 3rd and 4th and 2nd and 3rd. Now it's 1st and 2nd. Me personally, next year I will turn 40, so I get to play an age-protected division. So I don't know if I'll probably start in AM40. I haven't played in tournaments in a couple of years, but now that I can, I kind of want to just to check off the box. And then just like eventually get my children out here to get very personal. Like I have a soon-to-be 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and they see me playing and they see me coming out here playing. Like usually when I'm out of the house, they assume that I'm disc golfing, and I try not to do it too often when they're around, but I just love bringing them out here and seeing if it's something that they're into too. I'm never going to force it on them, but sharing things with the next generation is always a special.
You're talking about new players. How do you go about, being an ambassador of the game? How do you spread the sport?
For me, it's building courses, it's running tournaments, but then I think the biggest thing to help grow like the community, because we have a really good like local community of players here that help out, is just leagues. Like we have a tag league here, but there's lots of doubles leagues at courses in this area and around the state, and some singles leagues. Just doing that and giving people a chance to play with new people, because it's a great way to learn. And it's sometimes hard to do. Like not everybody's gonna like post anonymously on a Facebook group and meet up with a stranger, but they'll go meet a group of people and then maybe hit it off with some folks, exchange numbers, and have somebody to play with. That's how most of my disc golf friends have been met, was through leagues.
If you want to talk to the people, maybe there's some new players watching this, why should they try it? Why should they try disc golf?
It's a great way to get outside. It's great if you're in a new spot and you want something weird to check out that you wouldn't see otherwise. It's like a really good travel sport. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to enjoy nature if you're not a hiker, because I'm not like, I like to be outside. I wouldn't say I'm like outdoorsy, like I don't camp or rock climb or do that stuff, but I do enjoy being outside. So it's a nice way to be outside and appreciate nature in a way that you might not normally. And it can be what you want. It can be just something you do with friends once every couple months. It can be a borderline or a professional sport that you practice every single day. You compete at a high level. You try to put some trophies on your wall if you want it to be, or anything in the middle. So it really is very much a game or sport, that is what you make of it, and that's kind of a cool thing to have.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I got for now. So I really appreciate you for, taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to me and play around and all that stuff. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to help, and thank you for featuring this place that's
Of
very
course,
special to
yeah.
myself and a lot of us out here.
Dude, that sounded crazy. Sounded like a jet going by.